Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the FIDE Candidates 2022. 8 players, 14 rounds, double round robin, and after 6 rounds of action, a couple of players seem to be breaking away. They were Jan Nepomniachtchi and Fabiano Caruana building on sizable leads against the rest of the field, but it's not so crazy yet. And so in this round, we're trying to see if they're going to get caught, if someone's going to beat them, and someone's going to make the race more interesting. And today's recap was absurd. I mean, today's games were just absolutely nuts. We are going to kick things off in the game between Richie Report and Jan Nepomniachtchi. This game was, I mean, good lord. E4, E5. Knight f3, knight f6, a Petrov defends by Nepo, who just needs to keep solid with black. He is on +3, which means he's won 3 more games than he's lost, so 3-0. And I mean, he's just playing we've seen this before, right? We saw Jan play this against Hikaru. So bishop d3, bishop d6. There are a handful of setups here by black. Bishop f5, knight c6 is what Jan chose the first time that he played the Petrov, which was against Hikaru. But this time he plays bishop d6. In this tournament, Duda has played bishop f5. So we have this move, castles, and now the pressure builds on this pawn. Now, White's game plan here for the most part is knight to c3 or a knight to d2, rook to e1, very natural move as well. Sometimes you take, but oftentimes it's nice to just kind of leave that pressure there and pressure the center in this fashion. Black tries to equalize with something like bishop f5 or bishop g4. But in this game, Report goes for a surprise. He plays queen to b3. Now, queen to b3 is an interesting move. It creates pressure on the pawn. It doesn't create the threat of winning it, because after takes, and queen d5, you promptly lose your queen. So that is not really the threat. But it's just pressure, and it's preventing the light-squared bishop from moving. So it's a very interesting move, queen b3. And it's a decent surprise. It's a good, like I said, it's not easy for black to develop, because you either move your knight and block your bishop, or move your bishop and block and lose your pawn on b7, which obviously Jan doesn't want to do. So Jan moves his light-squared bishop out to g4 and loses his pawn on b7. This seems to be some sort of preparation. Right here, Report can play knight d2 or this knight to d2, but that looks a little bit suspicious. You know, queen h4 looks kind of terrifying, and there's some variations here where, black can at least force a draw. White doesn't have to take everything, but it's definitely an opportunity there. And if you take on b7, what will happen is I will take, open up your king, and then actually this will just probably lead to mate. So instead of that, Report takes the knight, and then in this position moves the knight out of the way to target this and this. So it seems like it's a very loose position that Nepo might be playing here. So did he prepare something? Seems like it, because he goes back to e7 and now targets the pawn on d4. So the knight takes, this takes, that's still there. And the craziest thing about this move is it's a fork. So black is definitely going to lose something, right? And black chooses to lose the rook in the corner. And at this point, white is just like 2 moves away from being winning. I mean, white will rescue the queen, maybe take on a7 and rescue the queen this way, develop the knight, develop the bishop, and win the game. White is just up a sizable amount of material. I mean, it's a rook and a pawn for a bishop, right? That's a large amount of material. But bishop h3 arrives on the board, and that's a cold shower right there. That is a savage move, and it's an absurd move, actually. It completely seals the deal for a draw. If you take this, you have check, here, check, etc., and the game just ends in a draw, right? I mean, that's exactly what's going to happen. Which is really unfortunate, because, I mean, a 15-move draw, really, with white? I mean, when Report played queen b3, he looked to surprise Jan, right? That was the entire idea of the move queen b3. And for Jan to just throw up, like, the complete refutation of this plan, like, no, you think you can take on b7? Here you go. I mean, this is what you get for thinking you could take on b7. Go ahead and take on b7, take my rook, yeah. You gluttonous fool, all right? I'm gonna force a draw. Maybe Jan's not so happy, but he's in first place in the candidates in a 10-minute draw with black. I don't think he's gonna complain. So Report just repeats moves. And then he didn't. Report played the move f3 after thinking for like 45 minutes, okay? Oh my. Oh, he did not repeat moves. Oh no, queen d3. Now here's the thing, Nepo knows the whole line. Nepo knows that white doesn't have to repeat moves, but white's entire army is asleep in their bunker while the queen is off wandering in the mountains like picking berries, you know? Like, I mean, I don't know what's going on. The whole kingdom is in disarray. All right? So king to g2 guards all of this, and now black gives another check. Report here can repeat again. Okay, so he's threatened with yet another repetition. And then he chooses to defend like this, but now the white queen can no longer escape. Report saw this. He went fully intending to give away the queen, and now there's only one queen left on the board. And my God, is that queen hungry. That queen is about to feast on the white position. You might ask yourself, why didn't Report play bishop to e3 to meet this move with potentially taking on a7? And I would answer your question with, I have no idea. I don't know why Report chose the bishop to go here, because it seems like a pawn for a pawn is a fair trade. I don't know. Of course there is queen d3, it's hardly the end of the story, but I don't know. He chose bishop f4, now we have this, brings the rook, black makes this getaway square for his king, very useful. And the thing about a queen, when a queen is on the board and you're playing it against a rook or bishop or rook and knight or two rooks or whatever, the queen will beat up isolated pieces. Like if the queen gets in here, she's gonna start just flailing away at everybody. And if she teams up with another one of her pieces, it's probably game over. And if there's any advantage, like 3 pawns versus 2, the queen is able to exploit that, right? So here comes the knight. Nepo rotates it back to the middle. And now we have h5. Queen slides out to f5 and h4, trying to decoy the pawn away so you can drive your knight in. And I said, the more help the queen gets, the better. So the bishop has to skedaddle to the other side of the board, and here comes Jan trying to get another trade you can't take because of this, but I'm gonna take you. So now the queen is just left with 2 rooks and this pawn, which is gonna suffocate the king. Queen f2, h3 by white, but here comes the bishop, and it's good that Jan made a getaway square for his king. Bishop g5 attacks the rooks. Here comes queen d2, and like I said, I mean, the queen's in, all right? She is going to attack everything and everybody. And as the defenses slowly get pried apart here, queen h3 falls, and Jan wins an absolutely effortless game with black. When this game ended, he had 2 hours on the clock. They start with 2 hours. He barely spent any time. He got to move 40, got his bonus time, and went back over 2 hours. I mean, it's unbelievable. That is now 4 wins for Jan in the first 7 games, and he hasn't been challenged in a single one of those games. None of those games were close. Crazy. All right. Next game that I have for you is the game between Duda and Hikaru. This one, another challenge of the Nimso Indian. The last time that this happened, Alireza went for queen c2, and it was an extremely complicated game. Here, Duda chooses e3 and bishop d3, one of the most classical setups. But after c5, he doesn't play the traditional main line of knight to f3. He plays knight to e2, and Hikaru puts 2 pawns in the center. This is an age-old variation. We have pawn takes on d5. Hikaru mirror image captures to attack the knight. And now we have an isolated pawn position, just a d pawn there for white. Sometimes black will capture and a pawn will appear and it will be the hanging pawn formation. But up until the first 11, actually 10 and a half moves of the game, this position had been seen a handful of times, and I think Hikaru defended it 3 times with rook to e8. Hikaru has had this 3 times when he has had the black pieces, and every time he chose rook e8. Here he thought for a while and moved his c knight to e7. So now the idea is that if the knight were to take, he doesn't necessarily have to take with the pawn. He can take with the knight and create a blockade against the isolated pawn, right? So Duda plays bishop c2 and queen d3, and Hikaru is being threatened with checkmate in 1 move, which he saw, f5. And that pawn's a little bit weak, but nobody can really attack it. I mean, the knight can't go to f4 because you lose it. So bishop b3, let's try to poke some holes at the black position. Duda takes, and Duda takes again. He gives away the bishop pair, but his idea here is to do this and immediately get rid of the bishop pair into an endgame where he has the open file for his rook, as well as a great knight versus an absolutely poopy bishop. Absolutely poopy bishop, right? That bishop is stuck behind a bunch of light squared pawns. Yeah, sure, it can go out this way, but then I'm gonna go like here, or here, or here, or here, or here, or literally any move. Take on d5 and so on. So, faced with this decision, And not wanting to fall back in development, Hikaru moves his rook to e8. He does end up trading, but he is just in time with counterplay with the beautiful move rook to e4. Anytime you have two rooks that stare like on straightaways against each other, you rarely want to be the one taking and surrendering the control to the opponent. What you really want to do is move the rook up to a square where if you're taken, then you create some sort of benefit for your position. So if the rook were to be taken on e4, black would play de4 or fe4 and now have connected pawns that work together as opposed to split pawns, right? The other idea of this move is it creates rook d4 as a threat with various intentions like this. So rook d1, trying to defend. Now the bishop is actually, despite being poopy, is actually not the worst piece in the world as it defends against d5. Now seeing that g5 is coming to remove the knight, here comes h4. Hikaru doubles up on the e-file and now controls it very nicely, creating just the right amount of counterplay to counteract the fact that the knight is very strong. b4, we have a little bit of dancing here with the pieces. By the way, you see what? It's the same concept. You don't want to take. You want to move the queen up so you can be taken and like this, right? And now we have an improvement to the structure, or bc5. And that does happen. Hikaru trades off the rook, Duda, and then ends up taking like this, bc5. And as like unpleasant as this position looks, this bishop is the glue of the black position. You'll notice that everything white has is on a dark square with the exception of the king, which means that this bishop cannot see anybody in the white position at all. Literally cannot see them. Like fog of war style, just there's no pieces. But it doesn't matter because white can't break through. And Duda tries his best. Hikaru does not go into the knight versus bishop endgame, sensing danger correctly. And then we have a big pawn swap. We have a swap of pawns here. We have a pawn there, pawn there, pawn there. And the game ends with a rook on 3 versus rook on 3 situation and a draw. So not much to say. I mean, I showed you the game. And that's just, it's not much. Hikaru played very well. Good defense. Rook a8, rook e4, very calm. Duda got absolutely nothing from the opening. I don't know why he allowed the Nimso. I mean, Alireza allowed the Nimso and built a 70-minute time advantage and detonated just a bomb of prep. And Duda just, I don't know, played a solid game, but nothing really happened. All right, will Ding Liren beat Alireza? Alireza's got a target on his back. Ding goes for a King's English with g3, bishop g2, and the players didn't trade for a very long time. You'll notice that Ding has a very solid, nice formation. He's going to castle, rook b1, typical English plans, trying to expand on the queen side, maybe like this. But then Ding plays d4. So Ding doesn't have to do that. He could play e3, d4. He could play a3 and try to build for b4. But he's like, no, I think Alireza's done some goofy stuff here with his pawns. I feel like I have some opportunities. I mean, this bishop is very nice, stands completely unopposed. But a4... you can't take, because the queen is overloaded. The white queen can't guard both knights at the same time. So black takes some space and just builds on... I mean, the fact that you can play... Oh, sorry, that is not what was played. The fact that you can play like this nowadays is absurd. Beginners are watching, and these 2800 level, chess gods are just moving their a-pawn twice and putting a queen behind it. And yes, I know... it has justification. They know what they're doing. But how do I explain this to some beginners watching? Now you're going to go home and play a4, a5, queen a4, hang your queen. You're like, well, Alireza did it. But no, Alireza gets some good activity here. And Alireza in this game started doing Alireza things. So here he spent 40 minutes on queen back to a7. 40 minutes. He has a lot of moves. Again, he has just rook e8 taking the file, bishop g6, just the preparation move, anticipating one of white's next moves. He goes queen a7 though. He spends 40 minutes on this move and falls behind on time again. Ding plays b3. Okay, he's trying to clarify over here, maybe play b4 in the future. That's what happens, rook e8. And again, Ding can play the move b4, maybe play rook a1, begin an initiative. You can take on c2 here, rook a7, bishop d1, rook a8, rook a8, rook d1. There can be this massive exchange. I don't know if it's good. Maybe Ding thought that he just didn't have enough here with this bishop. He thought the black had sufficient counterplay because he chose knight a4, and Alireza immediately goes to trade this bishop. He doesn't even hesitate. He's like, I absolutely must remove that bishop from its duties. Now, white no longer has an English bishop, and another swap, and Alireza begins chipping away at this pawn formation. What ends up happening is a 2-on-1, which at some point will probably become a 1-on-0 if my math serves right. There come the rooks to the center files. Right, queen c2, knight e4, and another trade, and you're gonna expect b5 at some moment. There it is. And here is our position after 29 moves. So far, an extremely high-level game of chess. And unfortunately, sometimes when that happens, between a guy rated 2806 and 2793, I think you can anticipate where this is going. Despite black having an outside pass pawn, it's not like that. It's not like Alireza is going to sneak it by Ding Liren. Like, oh, Ding! Yo, I'm pushing my... Oh, look at me! Like, he's not... You can't... It's a silent game. Ding sees the pawn coming, trades rooks, immediately goes after the pawn, blockades it, but black is going to be quick enough to guard the pawn or just create sufficient counterplay. Like if white gets a couple moves here, for example, knight d1, knight c3, white just wins the pawn, and then white is just better. So obviously Alireza plays knight e8 and f6 to bring the king so that the black knight can always guard when necessary. Ding advances his majority of pawns of 4 on 3. But there's nothing. I mean, there's just nothing. Here comes the active rook for Alireza. A little bit of tactics here. He defends it accurately. And I'm just clicking the forward arrow because there's a couple of things to, be mindful of here. For example, if you go pawn grabbing, you just lose, right? I mean, at the end of the day, the pawn, the rook, and the knight for white are what you have to keep an eye on. These guys are at the level where they see that, oh, I probably shouldn't get checkmated. And, yeah, the knight holds the ground. All the pawns fall off the board. And this one is a draw as well. Which brings me to our final game of the day. This game was one of the most insane games of chess that I have ever seen in my life. And frankly, combined with the first game of the day, with this absolutely WTF decision, yeah, this game also made me exclaim such things. So, e4, c5, it's going to be a Sicilian, which is interesting because Rajabov is playing for a win with black. Okay, knight f3, a6. This is known as the O'Kelly Sicilian. And it's bad. It's just not a good opening. But Fabiano spent like so much time here. He spent 15 minutes on move 3. The point is that the typical move d4 is met with a quick e5. And actually, black gets a good version of an opening here by playing knight f6, and if knight c3 getting very quick development, like bishop b4, d5 is possible. And this is a worst case scenario for white, which is why I always thought you play c3 here and play d4. And basically what might happen is you get a weird French defense structure. And like, as far as I know, white is just always better here. Just always better. This is just always known as a better structure for white. Fabiano plays c4, which is another option. And here gets hit with an absolutely absurd piece of prep. He plays d4, gets hit with e5, and gets hit with an impossible looking move as he's looking to go to d6. Again, the idea is this, get taken, have a nice positional advantage of dark squares, but we get hit with oh my. Now I've seen this move before, okay? But never at this level, and never in classical at this level. WTF. Where's the fridge? Seriously. So here's the point. If you play ED5, you lose this. If you play this move, which is what happens, then I'm still going to take, and then I'm going to move my knight to the middle. If you play queen takes d5, then there's bishop f5, and it's even worse because trading the queens is really bad for white, as now you have 2 threats to deal with. So d5 takes, knight d4, and Fabiano gives away the pawn on d5. So what does black have? A lot of activity, ideas of e4, long castle, knight f6, very quick active development. What does white have? Time. White has time. By targeting the queen cannot take on g2 because after bishop e4, queen has to go queen a4 check, and black gets a completely lost position after b5. You cannot take the rook, but you can go here, and it's slaughter. So black has to go back. Now Fabi castles, knight f6, quick development. Like, literally, look at these last, 4 moves. Whoop, whoop, whoop. Every move making progress. Suddenly, every piece is out. And here Rajabov rolls up his sleeves, picked up his cup of water, and threw it at Fabiano. Got it all over him, got it all over the board, and said, you want to fight? Let's fight. And then he castled long and pressed the clock. He only did one of those things Maybe he didn't throw the cup of water, but he basically indicated to Fabiano that he wants to scrap. I mean, the king has a wide open c-file, all right? Like, let's be honest. The king is wide open. The pawn on e5 is just straight up not being defended. Fabi's like, did you not see that that was guarded? Knight c6. Now there's this and this, so what does white do? Defends, nope. Takes the knight on f6 first and gets active. Blocks the queen from seeing the bishop. Bishop to c4. And a couple moves later, we had a queen trade, all right? I think Fabiano here, instead of queen d3, had this to try to get to b6. If queen b4 were to be played in this position, I think he can swap everything and maybe take on f7 and claim for a brief moment he's up 2 pawns, but there is rook d2 with some very active counterplay. Fabi chooses to do it this way, and several moves later we have a queen trade. So Rajabov is still down a pawn. That pawn that he allowed to be taken on e5, he never got it back. The only thing that he's relying on in this position is the opposite colored bishops. That's it. I mean, he's like, in the long run, I'll hold this game. Fabi's like, do your best. Rook c8, bishop d3, knight c6. Everything in black's position looks good. He's going to bring his rook. He has 5 pawns. White has 6 pawns. Where are white's pawn advantages? Right here. 4 on 3. Which means that probably at some point, he's going to try to overwhelm the black position, break through, win the game over there. Right? So what does he start doing? He starts building around that very powerful light squared bishop. Here comes his other rook. And here comes his king. His king is, it's okay to move your king right now because you never know when it's going to be necessary to get it involved in the game, right? Rajabov still has to play moves. There it is. Now we have rook back to d2, preparing just the absolute savage fork, knight d5, which would target everybody. So Rajabov just gets rid of the knight completely and creates a blockade with knight to e5 and f6. And visually, this looks very powerful. The knight is super strong. The rooks are super strong. How do you lift a blockade? You have to remove what's there. So at some point, you're going to have to play f4. The only reason you can't do this now is there's checks with threats. So it's time to move the king. And then it's time to move the king again. The king is going to be the piece which is going to walk up into the territory once the knight is removed. And then we're going to use our pawn majority to break apart the black defenses. This is incredible stuff by Fabiano, all the way back to when he played f3 and then king f2, and now the king is walking up the side of the board. This is amazing. And it's still going. Black has no counterplay here. If you take the pawn on c3 and go, well, I'm just equalizing. Nope. Knight c6, the rook gets in on the 7th rank, and we are feasting. We are going to eat all the pawns. So black cannot do that. He tries to go for b5 counterplay. Fabiano doing all the same stuff. He's going down the d file, defending. Here comes the knight on a4, king to g6. And Fabi takes a deep breath as his queen side has completely collapsed, which means that here comes Timur with b pawn and a pawn. And Fabi has to have calculated he will get to g7. The rook's defense has been cut off. The rook no longer sees the pawn. And let the most advanced pawns begin the march. Knight c3, king g7, here comes b4. Black is 3 squares away from queening. White is also 3 squares away from queening, but the king is in the way. What is the king doing? Move! Oh my goodness! Rajabov is going to queen in 2 moves. What is Fabi going to do here? Everybody relax. The rook guards. And if black plays a move like knight to a4, believe it or not, you're never getting through. For example, if this, and I clear the path, the bishop prevents the pawn from coming. If you play knight c3, I can even lose my bishop completely. And because your knight is so slow, the pawn moves. Your knight tries to get back. I have too many friends over here now. Incredible. The knight is so clumsy. You can take this. It's 3 on nothing. My pawns go. The white king, the absolute hero of this game, right? a5, king e6. And what you're about to witness is incredible. Both sides get to make queens. And the craziest part is Fabi queens, and it's Timur's move. It's his move. The king is wide open, naked in the middle of the board. He's like, oh my God. Oh my God, oh my God. I should not have taken those narcotics, all right? I shouldn't have done it. I'm sorry. Somebody get me back home, put me in bed. These pieces are like, yo, this king is a bozo. What is he doing? But the knight can't get to the king. The rook can't get to the king. Only the queen can get to the king. And the king is ready to just run to the corner or hide behind his pieces. Check. Queen f6. Let's not forget, a queen trade still wins for white. He has another pawn. It's the same situation. It's deja vu. So Timur goes here. Now here's something unbelievable happens. The king attacks the rook. The king is just straight up threatening to take the rook. We have rook c4. Now I'm threatening to trade rooks into a mate. This is mate in a couple of moves. The king can run, but bishop c6 wins the queen. Rook c7 is savage. The knight has 2 forks. This is a fork, but king d5 is mate in 7-6. But you can get forked, but still make your way out of this situation by taking or moving your king. This is unbelievable. Queen e5 check, Fabi forces a trade, and now he's ready to promote his 3rd queen of the game. And Rajabov's knight still can't get back. It just can't defend anything. The knight is just not powerful enough. It finally is able to stop this pawn with knight d6, but bishop will come back to d1 and b3, and black will be in Zugzwang. So here on move 56, Rajabov, rather than forcing 3 queens for both players on the board, called it a day and resigned. An absolutely unbelievable display of dominance by the 2 top players in this event. Fabiano Caruana has 5 points out of 7. Jan Nepomniachtchi has 5.5 points out of 7. The rest of the field has 3.5 or less. This is crazy. This is... The bookmakers had Nepo as the 4th, if not 5th likeliest player to win this event out of all 8. I saw a bookmaker that said Ding Liren was the favorite, Fabi was 2nd, Firouzja was 3rd, Hikaru was 4th, and Nepo was 5th. Even 6th somewhere. I saw Nepo as 4th, 5th. He is demolishing people. He's not even making it look difficult. Fabiano's games are battles, but he's also keeping close. What a candidates. Let me know how you feel. Is this exciting to have a 2-horse race? I'm kind of bummed that after half the event, it's over. I mean, it's all but over. We're not going to see anybody else make a comeback. I mean, short of something insane happening, I'm bummed. I'm bummed, and I'm hoping somebody makes a run, but I can't see it happening. So that's the end of round 7, folks. Thanks for hanging out with me. Thanks for pointing out your disdain or enjoyment of my shirts, and I will see you all back here for round number 8. Get out of here.